Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back. We have a very, very interesting guest with us today. We have the wonderful Dr. Sara Pugh. Thank you for being with us, Sarah.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. It's great to be here.
I think an interesting place to start is you refer to yourself as a quantum biologist. Could you explain what that means to someone who's maybe unfamiliar with that terminology?
Okay, it's sort of a way to look at biology through a physics lens because fundamentally, if we think about science, physics and maths are what really control chemistry and biology. And the word quantum, it's sort of loosely attached to quantum mechanics. But then if we think about quantum in another context, it actually means how much. And I think it's just one of these words that's become, it's just been attached to this field. Like, you can see things like a quantum Facebook ads or things like that. So it's just a way of sort of emphasizing it's a biophysics approach. And some people might say that it's looking at biology through a lens of light, water, and magnetism. But then there are other aspects of physics which personally I think are really important as well, like electricity and waves and things like that. So I just think for a person that's never heard of quantum biology, you could also think about it as a way of using nature and natural methods for healing. So that's sort of a very brief overview of where the word comes from. But like a lot of spaces, if you technically break down what quantum means, it doesn't actually link to water, light, and magnetism. But that's what people who have heard about quantum biology probably think it's about.
Mm. Okay, that's super clear. It seems like it's a more multidisciplinary approach to biology, right? It's sort of removing those jurisdictional boundaries a bit and looking at it in a slightly broader way. You're also a hypnotist. How do those
Yeah,
things
that's
combine?
correct. Um, yeah, I was. Yeah, that's the thing with quantum biology. I suppose people have heard of metaphysics and things like that, which is sort of more esoteric. So with hypnosis, the reason I got into it was after I left science, I used to teach movement, and then people used to randomly tell me something really personal, and I didn't really know how to deal with it. Then I decided to learn hypnotherapy, but I was more interested in hypnosis, as in stage hypnosis and phenomena and much deeper things than just getting rid of phobias and knowing what to say if somebody tells you something really personal. So that's how I got into it. And I think, the power of the mind and how consciousness actually works is very physics based. And I didn't know that back then. But a lot of it, I was interested in hypnosis because I wanted to know if people really were thinking they were a giant chicken or the person next to them really was Michael Jackson. And it's definitely real. I'm sure there are people that go on stage and pretend, but I'd say the majority is actually a true phenomena. So that's how I got into hypnosis. And then I got into close up magic. But mixing hypnosis and close up magic isn't the best idea because we all know really that close up magic isn't real magic. And then it sort of takes away, people then sort of think, oh, maybe hypnosis is like mentalism, it's fake as well. Whereas for certain, the phenomenon of hypnosis is very real and there's sort of no boundaries of where you can go with it. I mean, the military have taken it to the nth degree, and then very good stage hypnotists or street hypnotists also have sort of taken it pretty far as well. And I think it always, no matter what, with hypnosis, there's always something that'll surprise me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, what an interesting field to end up in, and so broad as well. But you started off in molecular mechanisms, right? And I guess you went from molecular mechanisms to the sort of the mitochondria in the mind. What led that transition?
Okay, so I always really liked science as a child, but I also like movement and religion and anything related, like ghosts or even occultism, aliens, stuff like that. So I went to university and I just did biochemistry and genetics, and it was really interesting. A lot of it was not right, but I didn't really know back then anyway. And then I did a PhD in protein folding, and it was a Wellcome Trust PhD, so it was multidisciplinary. So I did some chemistry and some biophysics as well, and then it was just called molecular mechanisms because, like quantum biology, we have these names in science like molecular biology and it doesn't really mean anything. Even people who do molecular biology couldn't sort of define it for you. Then after that, I did a project on statins and cholesterol. That was more biological. And by then, I sort of had an idea that there was a little bit of things going on in terms of research funding. And with the statins back then in 2007 and 8, it was sort of, here's some money. Can you just do a project to show something good about statins? Because they were all the rage then. And after that, I sort of could see there was a lot of, it's who you know, and it's about money and not about knowledge. And then I left to be a movement teacher, and that opened up sort of a much more right brain world. So I learned things like myofascial release, hypnosis, Bowen therapy, multiple different ways to move the body, not just Pilates, but things like Franklin method and Olympic lifting, and just generally I would say biomechanics. And because when you work in a field like that, you do meet energy people, and you begin to see the body's more than just a piece of meat or just bones or just a machine. And then after that, I think probably 8 years ago, I found Dave Asprey, and he had these orange glasses, and he was talking about red light and exclusion zone water. So that's how I learned about how light is really important for biochemistry, even though I use light a lot in my PhD, because I used to work with fluorescent dyes, and there's a lot of things which we use fluorescence and light for in science. I mean, a lot of lab tests, blood tests are based on sort of fluorescence assays and things like that. So most biochemists know how to use light. We've got no idea really what it is. And we definitely wouldn't know how sunlight and blue light and UV light are really important for health. We would know about what they do in a lab. And then it just sort of led from there. And once you get into light, then it sort of leads into water. But I did know a bit about water from my PhD, that it was more than just a solvent. And then in places like Bowen therapy and myofascial release, they've known for ages about true hydration. It's not just about drinking 8 glasses of water a day, and that we have a water battery. I did learn at university that mitochondria make water, but the emphasis was that they make ATP. So I didn't know back then how important our water battery was. And then when you start to link water and light together, you can see how the sun would be the perfect solar panel, and then the water can act like the battery, because the exclusion zone or fourth phase water can charge separate, and then electrons and protons can flow. And now we've got bioelectricity. And fundamentally, everything in the universe is just charge. So bioelectricity and how much redox or electrons or power or whatever you want to call it that we've got just dictates our mood, how fast we move, how well we are. So it all sort of comes back to energy. And then you can get massively complicated with all of this to validate the science. But fundamentally, people want to know that it's correct, but also what can I do, which was useful, because having worked in movement for a long time, I was quite comfortable with explaining things to lay people in lots of different ways and showing people how to do something, or making things interesting or whatever. Because with science, like, scientists are way cleverer than I am, but they're not able to convey information to non-scientists. So I think anybody, including people like your podcast, it's really important to be able to educate lay people, but also tell them how it's applicable to their lives.
Absolutely, yeah. It's I often speak with brilliant people who are so, and they're often very siloed, brilliant, but not the best marketers of their own work. And as a result, no one reads their papers. And as a result, they're not talking and having the impact that they might have if they focus on the marketing and the translation a little better, which is interesting. But I think you're right. It has to be applicable. Like, how can I use it, right? So on that, I mean, I have heard you say when it comes to health, light is more important than food.
Oh no, I've never said that.
You never said
Jack
that?
Krug's probably has.
Ah, okay.
I think that everything, there's like multi pillars of health, and nutrition is vitally important. So I'm absolutely avidly against seed oils, people eating processed food, eating out of season food, eating stuff out of packages. My kind of rules are about inflammation or autoimmune disease or metabolic situations. No seed oils, no gluten, no sugar, no processed dairy, and don't be buying pineapples in the middle of the winter if you live in the UK, because it's completely incompatible. And then just basic stuff like don't overeat, but don't starve yourself either, because I think fasting is really important as well. So everything's sort of a balance. And then I've got of course, light's really important because it drives the body clocks and biochemistry, but then so is water, so is magnetism, so is gravity. And then, of course, having taught movement for a long time, I think that movement, even just walking, is crucial. And then there's obviously making sure that people don't have deficiencies, say in particular minerals or vitamins, but then also making sure they're not overdoing supplements and making imbalances, because a lot of biology is a pair, like we've got light and dark, and we have to get darkness at the appropriate time, and then we need light at the appropriate time. Then I mentioned food, that going without food or fasting is really important, but then so is making sure that you eat the appropriate food for your location, that's as less messed about with as possible. And then with other kind of hot and cold, for example, cold therapy is hugely valuable, as are saunas. So I think a lot of about how I work with people, that some people are really good at one aspect, like they might be brilliant at movement, but then they're eating a vegan diet that's full of processed vegan food, and they're shipping in plants from other countries and then wondering why they've got like joint pain, even though they're a movement teacher. So I think it's just a lot about having different lenses to look at health through, and then seeing where somebody's really good or doing really well, and then helping them understand how improving, say, their water or their mitochondria or their body clock or their leptin sensitivity could be really important for them. So it's all about, there isn't, I don't think, a recipe. There's like pillars of health, I would say, but then there's not an absolute blueprint, because it does depend on how old somebody is, where they live. And like anything, if you get too much of something, including the sun, that's going to be a problem as well. So I think it's sort of about balancing. And I think in terms of physics, people think everything's just biochemistry, like we're a chemical reaction or a lump of meat. And we're a lot more than that. And it takes a while for people to understand about how light drives biology, but then they forget that on a physics level, like mass, we could describe mass as being rotating charge that's gained inertia, or cooled down plasma, or slowed down light. So we're kind of made of light as well. And then we've got all of these intricate pathways of how light controls hormones, like how it can control cortisol, thyroid hormone, insulin, melatonin, and things like that. Really fundamental hormones for waking us up, regulating energy levels, and things like that.
Sorry for misquoting you, by the way.
Oh, don't worry about it. I just said I just cleared it up. But that's the thing. It doesn't matter. Like with food, there are people who do all the food stuff perfectly, but still, if they're sitting under blue light, artificial blue light all day, and then playing on TikTok until 2 a.m., they're not gonna. That the food alone isn't going to undo a bad body clock, because the body clock's regulated predominantly by light, although food is a timekeeper as well. So yeah, that's it.
Let's talk about light then. Let's talk about what your ideal day looks like from a light point of view. What do you try to? What are your light non-negotiables from a good light point of view, and then also avoiding this junk light point of view?
Okay, so I'll just start with the bedroom. So the bedroom, ideally, in an ideal world, would be pitch black, but luckily it's not very expensive to get blackout curtains. And then it's very easy to take technology out of the bedroom, so you don't need a TV in there. And then not to charge your phone in your bedroom by your head. And then some people do use aircon or air filters, just to put a black like piece of gaffer tape or something over the little LED. So make the bedroom pitch black. So then you optimize your melatonin, and you don't allow light to disturb you, because when the sun's set, our eyes and skin are much more sensitive to light. So the margin for wiggle room is kind of smaller. then assuming we slept really well, I think if people get up a bit before sunrise, it's called daybreak, and there's enough light there that you don't need to turn on the lights, and then to go straight outside and go for a walk, and then actually, if possible, see the sunrise. So I always go and find somewhere when I'm in Leeds. I walk up a hill. There's a really big church that I like to meditate near, and I can see the sun coming up, and I let the sunlight get on my skin and go in my eyes. So I sort of call it eating the sun. And people who are breatharians or very spiritual have told me for a long time about the physics behind the sunrise. And then I've learned it in a sort of more electrical engineering context. But for a long time, the ancients, whether it's yogis or whatever civilization you want to talk about, all revered or really valued the sunrise. And there are lots of practices like Agni-Hota, which is sort of performed at sunrise. So it doesn't matter if people are Western or Eastern. We've known for a long time it's an important time. Then, because food does have a sort of timekeeping effect, it's a good idea to have breakfast. Um, um, but then, we won't sort of delve too much into food because there's lots of sort of other more interesting things we can talk about. Then the next thing would be, so when I do my sunrise routine, I don't take my phone and I don't look at it because I want as much natural light as possible. I want my eyes to see real light, the sunrise first, because if you open your phone and look at it, the light intensity that comes out of the phone is very blue and very bright, and that'll tell your brain it's 12 noon. So in terms of like shocking the system, looking at the phone, first of all, is really bad biologically. And secondly, no matter what, you're always going to find something in your phone you don't like in the morning or that's unnecessary. So it's better to just use the light, the natural light, to let your body wake up. The other thing about light in the morning is we want to get over sort of like over like 20,000 lux ideally, because our eyes and skin are not so sensitive in the morning to light. So we need to actually sort of go outside and as much as possible get the light. And it doesn't matter if it's cloudy. It's not ideal because it's not as pretty, but you'll still get the correct light signals. And this is going to turn on, first of all, your hormone pathways for the day at the right time. Sort of like, say, if there was like a film or a concert, the sunrise is the beginning, and if you turn up late to a film or a concert, you kind of have missed the beginning and you sometimes can't catch up. So when you've missed the sunrise, you've missed the opportunity to set your body clocks for the day, but you'll get another chance in 24 hours. Then the next important part is sort of something called the ultraviolet A rise. So that's probably about an hour-ish or an hour and a half-ish after sunrise, but it depends on your location, because obviously it's going to change from location to location and time of the year. And the UVA rise is really important for making particular neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin. It also encourages the body to make nitric oxide, that's really important for blood pressure, the immune system, cardiac function. And then after that, in the UK, we only have 6 months of the year when we have UVB as well. So that's when we can make vitamin D. So that's a really important aspect of light that we need, because vitamin D has about 200 roles in the body, ranging not just from bones, which people are familiar with, but everything from metabolism, cancer, skin health, all sorts of things, metabolic rate, sex hormones. So even if people work, it's sort of not ideal, but most workplaces will let people go out for walks or open windows. And if people are self-employed, then that's even better, because you control your own schedule and you're able to do these different light sort of times of the day. Then there's an afternoon ultraviolet light, and I've found that to be really helpful for managing appetite, because ultraviolet light also encourages the body to make enkephalins and endorphins. So there are feel-good hormones. And a lot of people who do have issues with snack accidents or binge eating or eating when they shouldn't, it tends to be more in the evening. So I found that afternoon light is very helpful. But the whole light sequence it is really important for helping people, not just with mood, but with metabolism, because we get over sort of 60% of our energy from the sun anyway. So if we're not getting enough sunlight, the body's going to be wanting energy sources from elsewhere. So the next best thing it'll think of will be food electrons. Then say we managed to do all of those things in the day. We went out and got the morning light, the sunrise, then we saw the UV rise and set the neurotransmitters. Then we went out and got some vitamin D, or well, some UVB. Then went out again in the afternoon to help with sort of other biological pathways. Ideally, it'd be nice to see the sun set, but a lot of people, even if they don't know anything about quantum biology, like to walk the dog at sunset or sunrise because it's just really beautiful. And then once the sun's gone down, we want to block light, because our body and biology isn't expecting bright light, especially artificial blue light, because it's going to really screw up melatonin and sleep. And huge amounts of people really struggle with sleep. So it would be back again now once the sun sets to focus on getting sort of darkness, because like I said before, light is really important, but the absence of light or darkness is a really important part of biology, because that's when we do our sleeping, our healing, our detoxing, our recharging. So even if we have a difficult, stressful life, if we can sleep and recharge or regenerate, then at least we can recover from the day. So in a very big whirlwind, like a tornado tour of quantum biology, that's sort of how I would structure my day with light. If people have to work at jobs with technology, you can get blue blocking glasses. I don't have any at the moment on because I've got my door open to let natural light in, but it's not ideal to stare at a computer all day, because it's, first of all, messes up hormones, but also it's just really bad for your eyes. So that's another thing. If people work around screens, you can get special glasses to block the blue light that's going to be damaging, but then they're not the same as the evening blue blockers, because they are much oranger or redder. The daytime ones are for protecting people from the artificial light in the day. So sort of something that, even if people can't do all of that, a lot of people can do some of it. And
Absolutely.
some people want to do everything. Like at my age now, anything that anybody tells me that's a good idea, I'll just do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to eat the sun every morning.
Yes.
What
Or
I
what,
do,
even when it gets up at 4 o'clock in the UK.
I'll try my best. I really will. Actually, funny enough, I've been going to, there's a cricket pitch near me. I've been pretty much doing my exercise around it every single morning on the sunrise. But the last couple of days I haven't, because the sunny spell is gone. And I notice my day isn't as good, and my light hygiene isn't there. So I do notice a big difference when I do that. Just on a few things you mentioned charging, no charging the phone in the room as well. Um, what's the detrimental effect of that?
First of all, when it comes to non-native EMFs or non-native electromagnetism, it's basically invisible light that we can't see, that's artificial, that's completely man-made. And all of our biology is designed for natural electromagnetism. So that would be sunlight. Then the Earth itself makes a magnetic field. Then we've got something called the Schumann resonance, which is, we will just call it the heartbeat of the Earth for the moment, but it's something that entrains biology. It's like a conductor, and biology is the orchestra. So these natural wavelengths of light, or these natural forces like gravity as well, and then magnetism, we evolved, and so did everything else on the planet, to use them as signals. So when we start making artificial radiation, it's light that we can't see, or electromagnetism that's artificial. So biology's got no idea what to do with it. So first of all, it's not just about us, it's about, it really damages like wildlife as well. Because some people, when I try to talk to them about turning off Wi-Fi at night, and don't have loads of iPads and everything in your house, because it hurts your animals and your children as well. So that's kind of a way to explain that all biology doesn't like Wi-Fi and 5G and things like that. So first of all, if we think about also our consciousness, which is all electrically centripetal, so that's like everything that I am is electrical, and it's all tuned, and it's in a very fine way, and it all has to be waves in a particular kind of ratio. So if you then get a mobile phone that's probably one of the most powerful computers you could ever hold, that can do phone calls, it can do it's Wi-Fi, it can connect with G networks, and it's hugely powerful. why on earth would you want to put that by your head when you're trying to sleep to recharge? And also, our hearts are hugely electromagnetic as well. They're massively complicated and really interesting. And putting something like a phone that's biology, everything's all very intricate and quite low level of waves and frequencies. So you're putting a great big thing that's going to disturb our intricate systems near really important organs like the brain and the heart. And the second thing about non-native EMFs and phones is they're very dehydrating. And like I said before, our water battery is vital for health. And the brain contains something like 70% exclusion zone or fourth phase water. And our blood flow, it all depends on this fourth phase or special water. So anything that's going to dehydrate us is going to be detrimental, because if the blood can't flow properly, it can't feed the organs. If the brain can't function properly, we can't think well. And then the other factor about artificial radiation is it's like white noise. So say when we're trying to work and people are using leaf blowers or mowing the lawn or kids are screaming, it's really stressful and frustrating. That's how the cells feel with sort of all of this background radiation going on. So I completely accept that we all have to use Wi-Fi and phones. It's part of technology, but nobody needs their phone in their bed. So it's something that ideally in my own house at home, I turn off the electricity in my bedroom as well. So I don't have any electricity in the walls either, because I just want an environment where I can recharge and recover. So that's what I think. I mean, people get cross when I say things like this, but I'm not doing it for my own benefit. I'm trying to explain to them. And then there's also the book, The Invisible Rainbow. There are studies that correlate putting electronic devices near your head and brain cancer. And if you read the iPhone manual, it says, don't whatever you do, put the phone by your head or by your bits. It says it in the phone instructions, so very clearly in bold writing. So there's like numerous reasons of why you want to make your bedroom like a electronic safe place as well.
Okay, I'm sold. I won't do that. And the other thing you said I've got a question on
Oh yeah, and
is,
earbuds are even worse.
oh, really? What sort of Bluetooth?
Well, yeah, because they're kind of it's concentrating all of this radiation into your brain, and when you start to learn about what consciousness is, and like all these different alpha beta waves, and we have like a vortex tornado in our brains. The last thing you want to do is interfere with that, because it's your whole life, like it's your consciousness is your whole self, and
Wow.
nothing. So there's all different reasons of why it's just a bad idea. But then people can't be recluses either. But I think it's just people need to be aware of how potentially damaging it is. It's different in some ways for someone like me or my mum and dad, because we didn't grow up with phones. It's more about children having excessive exposure to iPads and iPhones, because first of all, their brains are not myelinated properly, and their skulls are thinner than ours, and their blood-brain barrier is different. So I just think it's something that making people aware of the potential hazards is really important.
100%. I actually, I used to play lots of rugby and I stopped playing because I like being able to think and I didn't want the concussions and things like this. And I remember when the first Bluetooth headphones came out and I started using them about 6 months in, I just felt like my brain wasn't working as well as it used to. And ever since, I'm very sort of hesitant about using them. And the last, I guess, 3 or 4 months, I've been using these ones, the sort of old school ones. And I don't know, maybe it's placebo, but I do feel subjectively a little bit better, which is, I guess, you explain why, perhaps. Um, Another question I have on something you said, so I use the red blue blocking glasses at night. Would you say it's beneficial for me to use that in the day when I'm on my laptop?
No, I'd use the yellow ones. And then for blue blockers, you don't use them when you're outside, because if you try and use the very red or orange ones in the day, it'll make your brain think it's evening and you might want to be kind of awake and working. So the yellow ones are for working at the computer.
Okay, great. And That's super clear. I had on Monday I had a podcast with Dr. Gerald Pollack, who I know you've had on your YouTube channel. Brilliant man, fascinating mind, and we talked about the fourth phase of water. Um, for someone who's not familiar with his work, could you link light and the fourth phase of water in the body, and why is it so important?
Okay, so with the fourth phase of water, it's sort of like a gel-like phase, and it's he will have talked about something called an exclusion zone where the water charge separates, and this water covers every single surface in the body. So that means all biochemistry or all biochemical reactions have to occur through this medium of water. So it can lubricate as well. And the reason it's important is that as he will have explained, it can also charge separate. So that means it can act as a battery. So it's a massive energy source. And then he will have talked about his experiment when he accidentally shone some light on, it was a dish. And then he noticed this exclusion zone water. He will have maybe described it as it expanded. So that, in simple terms, means if you go outside in the sun where there's lots of red and infrared light, it's going to automatically expand or increase your amount of the fourth phase or living water or coherent water or liquid crystal water, whatever you want to call it, special water. So going outside and getting sun is going to be very important for allowing your body to act like a solar panel in one way. Another way that the sunlight helps us act like a solar panel that relates to water is it improves mitochondrial function, and mitochondria make deuterium depleted metabolic water, which then will get structured into this water in the body. Also, the other important thing, maybe he won't have gone into this, that water is a very unusual compound, and it's got the ability to hold and store information. And so it can propagate information around the body. So there's a lot more to it than just storing energy. It can also convey and store information as well. So that's something that's important, considering how complicated it is to run a human being. I think each cell does something like 500,000 reactions per second, and then we have trillions of cells. So you can imagine how many reactions are happening per second. And something like water and light together allow this to happen extremely quickly, but also the amount of information that can be conveyed using light and water, because there are something like 10 to the 36 different wavelengths of light if we include ultraviolet and infrared. So it's that many possible signals, sort of like a piano with that many keys. So you can imagine how many complicated songs or music you could make out of such a piano, and that kind of translates into trying to run a human being. So yeah, the water is a really important medium for this to happen in. And then there's more things to water about the geometry of it, linking back to sort of Pythagorean mathematics. So water's been revered and worshipped and believed to be very important for a long time. And now, using scientific methods, we can validate the fact that water's this sort of remarkable molecule that's way more than just something for washing dishes in. It's got all of these unusual properties. Even just its surface tension, you can see little insects and things skating along the top of a pond. It's something very intelligent made water.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. I was reading about superfluidity earlier. I don't know how I
Oh
got
yeah, that's
onto
the
it.
ether. Yes, the ether is like a superfluid of charge. But yeah, that's and then with water, it's like a really important medium for propagating and storing information and holding energy as well. So yeah, but back to just in simple terms, if you go outside where there's sunlight, that's going to be able to charge your water, because there's of course ultraviolet light out there as well, which also expands the exclusion zone or just makes more exclusion zone or fourth phase water. And then when we come inside and are around non-native EMFs, they do the opposite. They're going to lower the amount of easy water, and then artificial blue light does the same. But then people can feel this for themselves, because if we travel, even though we don't do anything in the airport and sit for like 10 hours, it's the most exhausting thing ever.
Mm.
And it's sort of the most anti-quantum thing ever, an aeroplane, and everybody can vouch that they're always exhausted after traveling. So it's very dehydrating. So it doesn't matter how much water you drink on the plane. On a quantum biology level, you're going to be dehydrated.
Okay, so you've just gotten off the plane from England to wherever you are now in the
Yeah.
world. How do you think about rehydrating then, if it's not just about drinking water?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would go and find somewhere. I'd go outside and get sunlight, because the other problem with traveling is it's not. I'm also really high up, so I'm away from the Earth's magnetic field, and I'm not grounded. So I'd find somewhere where I can just be in the sun first of all, because the sunlight's going to start to help my mitochondria come back online, help to expand the water in the body, and then I'll find somewhere to ground. Like a beach is the best thing to do, is to like get into a body of water, because you get a full body experience of being grounded to absorb electrons, which are then going to increase your charge. And with drinking water, that's a whole other topic, because it kind of depends on the water, because it's a different kind of dehydration that I'm talking about. So what you'd have to do is think of everything that the aeroplane did and then find the opposite. So walking on a beach would be very beneficial for all the reasons I've said, because you get the sunlight, you get the ground, you get grounding. If you go in the sea, that's even better, because it's a full body experience. So that's what I would do, because people know about things like electrolytes and minerals and stuff like that, but that's just biochemistry. I'm not saying that minerals are not important. Making sort of distilled water with the right amount of minerals is important, but you can't use biochemistry to undo what physics did when you flew in an airplane, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like from first principles, physics is the foundational piece, I imagine. Um,
Yeah.
if when it comes to, I guess, energy on a day-to-day basis, if people really invest in, everything you said with light, and then everything we're talking about with charging that easy water, that kind of that water-like battery we have inside our cells, do you think that is the lowest hanging fruit most people aren't pulling?
um Yes, because if we think about, okay, if we just loop back to what I was saying about a light routine, it's free to go outside, and it's free to take your shoes off, and it's free to see the sunrise, and things like that. So yeah, I would say it's a low hanging fruit. But then also buying blue blockers is very easy, and wearing glasses is also a low hanging fruit as well. So I would just say, yeah, definitely. But also, I think it depends on the person, because I would also say distilling your water and remineralizing is a massive low hanging fruit, because it's very easy, and you've got to buy one thing, and then you press a button and come back in an hour, and it's done it for you, and then you add some minerals, and you've made really clean water. So that's kind of important as well. But I would definitely say that the low hanging fruit is to do optimize your circadian rhythm, because that's basically your timing in your body. So if your timing's all off and chaotic, it's going to be inefficient, and anything that's chaotic and inefficient, including some of my technology, my laptop, it gets slow and clunky. So it's like a person, if their body clocks are out of line or timing, that they're just going to not function optimally, whether they want to, if they don't believe anything I say. It's something that, in terms of trying to run a complicated organism like a human, we've got organs that have to do things at a certain time, then we've got nerves and things, and neurotransmitters that have to be made quickly, then cells have to divide, genes have to be turned on and off. And like I said, there's a lot of reactions that happen per second. So making sure the timing is right, or even if people have had a classic car and had to do the timing. I used to have a Ford Capri. You'll know that if the timing's off, your car sometimes it won't even start, but you're not going to get the best performance out of it. So the timing, the circadian rhythm or body clock is really important. And just on an even like more basic level, for somebody that's never heard of any of this before, just having a pitch black bedroom and not exposing yourself to bright lights before bed and in the evening, and then going out and getting more sunlight than normal, is going to help, because it's the very most basic part of what biology on this planet's driven by, which is we have a nighttime and we have a daytime. So that there's lots of low hanging fruit. I think it depends on how you want to look at it. But definitely the light, I think, is a low hanging fruit because it's free and it's not complicated. Sure, there's way that you can get really complicated with things like magneticos, like magnetic sleep pads, and then hydrogen water, and that can be scary and overwhelming for people in the beginning. That's why I always tell people to do the free stuff, because it's like a currency. I think sort of time and effort, it is there's always a payoff when you put time and effort into something. Same as, yeah, sure, you can put money into something and get something at the end, but time and effort are also you get a reward at the end.
Mm. Yeah, very well said. When it comes to like this sort of the consciousness and your mindset, where does it fit into this holistic piece about health?
Okay, so if we think about something like a bliss state where we want heart and breath coherence, so there's something called a Mayer wave, which is sort of to do with the heart, the flow rate of the fluid, the blood in the body. Then we've got like the heartbeat, and then there's things like heart-brain coherence. So we want the heartbeat, and then the brain waves, the alpha, beta, gamma, delta, no, not deltas in the daytime waves to be coherent, and you want them to be in something called a golden ratio. So golden ratios are really important kind of ratio or number that occurs everywhere in biology. So we want that to be coherent. And then, like I'd said before, we've got incoherent waves, which would be non-native EMFs and things like that, radiation and Wi-Fi, like a conductor that's trying to distract an orchestra. So if we've got our breathing, our heart, our brain waves coherent, and then we've got coherent full spectrum sunlight, and we're grounded, so we're accessing, or we'll just call it sort of fractality for now, and we're in what we'll call the Schumann resonance, which is the heartbeat of the earth. Everything's now in coherence, so it's like we're oscillating at a frequency that's coherent. It's not chaotic. It's how nature intended. And one of the results of this would be accessing something called a bliss state. And inside or from bliss states, people can sort of get into deep meditation, do things like remote viewing, manifesting, telepathy, all of these kind of things that people don't believe in just because they've never been in a state where everything's sort of completely coherent. So I don't want to sort of get too complicated and deep into this because it's a whole other podcast. It's sort of the work of somebody called Dan Winter, who talks a lot about golden ratio and everything being in coherence. So if the outside environment is coherent and then we have a coherent environment on the inside, everything's all the waves are non-destructively charge collapsing or compressing. And people do agree that consciousness is charge collapse, but some people say that charge collapse causes consciousness, and other people say consciousness is charge collapse, and then this sort of charge gets distributed efficiently. So in sort of a very in a nutshell, without going too complicated, hopefully making it simple to explain to people why meditating outside is much better and productive than trying to meditate with a Wi-Fi box by your head, or meditating in a car, which is like an aluminium box. And then obviously things like Rupert Sheldrake's work, for a very long time, he's been talking about the morphic field and how consciousness doesn't reside inside skulls. So in these bliss states, that's where things like action at a distance can happen. And nobody said that the entanglement or action at a distance is not possible. Einstein only called it spooky because he didn't know how it worked. So there's a lot more to the mind than people think. So the more coherent you are on the inside, the more coherent your environment, you can access these bliss states, make things called longitudinal or compression waves, and then things like action at a distance are possible. So whenever people are, say, manifesting anything, they're asking for something that's not within time space right now. So they're sort of projecting or asking for something in the future. So there's that sort of, I don't want to go, I'll probably confuse people already, but I think it's something that it's hard to try and condense the work of somebody like Dan Winter all into sort of 5 minutes. But what I'm trying to say is the power of the mind is way more than people think. And the reason they often don't believe in this is because they've never had an experience to tap into it, because they're not connected with nature or the sun or the Schumann resonance. And then they think heart brain coherence, like heart math, is just wooish and for hippies and yoga people. So they don't realize what kind of mind conscious state they can create all by themselves in the right environment, and then wonder why they have sort of issues with their mindset.
What's remarkable, Sarah, is you seem to know both sides of this spectrum like the back of your hand. You know, the hardcore science is sort of merging with what was maybe 10, 20, 15 years ago considered quite sort of out there and woo woo, right? But it seems like they're all one and the same thing and all very interrelated.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But everything is just made of waves. That's the thing. It's like we're just light slowed down, or you can say that we're rotating charge that's gained inertia. You can use physics language, but then people who are spiritual will just say exactly the same. They'll just use a different vocabulary. And then for people who do get interested in this, it does unlock doors. So it's very much, you have to feel it in your own body. That's why I don't try and convince anybody. If they're not interested, it doesn't make any difference to me. It's their loss. They can, take antidepressants if they want, or, to try and find happiness or whatever they want to do. It's just about a lot of things are really, it really is that simple, but you do need to be connected with nature. And some people they don't want to know the physics. They're very much feel it in their own body people. So I'll explain it in two ways. And then they just want to know, okay, so you've told me about all these waves and I'm made of waves and I need to make a bliss state and everything has to be in coherence like an orchestra. So I just need to go outside, go and make my breathing and my heart rate in coherence. And then you've told me that all of these things are possible. So I just have to use my imagination, and they'll just go off and do it. And they don't want to know the science. And then there are some people who, like me, who has always known that there's a lot more to the brain. I just didn't know what the physics was. And then over time, you realize that spiritual science and how my body works on a biochemical level, it's all exactly the same physics. That's why I can't seem to understand, is that to me, it's so obvious. It's just the same thing. It's just waves. And whether it's matter or not matter, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. So I'm not saying that I'm denying a table isn't here or we're not here, we're mass or matter, but like on a physics level, we are made of sort of electromagnetism. So there's so many different ways to explain the same thing. And even if people pretend to disagree with me, they don't really, because a lot of people have had sort of past life experiences, or they've had telepathic experiences with their best friend or their husband or wife or their dog, or they've had a dream that came true, or they had a dream, they were just daydreaming and all of a sudden they remote viewed by accident. So secretly people are really hungry for this kind of information, but you're completely correct that in the past that scientists would have laughed at it, and a lot of the time people are afraid of being laughed at, so they just keep it to themselves and just tell somebody who is on the same wavelength as them, maybe not their friends down the pub, even though their friends down the pub probably have also had lots of mystical experiences or are looking for them. And then people are always wanting to take mushrooms or go on ayahuasca retreats. So they're obviously trying to find more than just this sort of boring 9 to 5, go to work, get up, 2.4 children world. People are in lots of different ways seeking for more. And there's many, many different ways that people discover or wake up. So I think it's just about not forcing the information on people, just telling them that it's real, and then letting them sort of, or encouraging them to be able to remove things that are getting in the way, and then doing things that's helping. And it doesn't matter what religion somebody is. The physics doesn't mind if you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Wiccan or a Sufi or a Kabbalist. The way in which it all works is the same. So I don't understand like religion wars or my God's better than yours, because the physics is the same.
Mm. It's almost it's different doors to the same house, right? It's there's something fundamentally universal there. Um, Sarah, we're going to end with some quick fire questions. If I may, it's my attempt to pack in as much as I can in the last 10 minutes. Um, it sounds like you meditate a fair amount. What surprised you most about meditation?
Yeah, you were just breaking up a bit. So yeah, I'd call it like doing a ceremony. So what was the question?
What surprised you most about meditation?
I think how easily I get distracted because I have to try so hard. But I think with meditation, I think it's something that um, there's so many different ways to do it that it's like exercise. There's so many different kinds of ways you can move your body. There's something for everybody. And the same with meditation. There's so many different ways to do it that you just have to find what resonates with you. I particularly like at the moment the Monroe Institute binaural beats, but also I can do things myself. I'm not the best at sitting and making my mind empty for like 10 minutes, but I can um, think of nothing so I'm not distracted. But then I also like meditations that have chanting or sound in them because sound is really important. It doesn't matter if it's a mantra or if it's chanting chakra sounds or there's sound meditation in every religion or discipline, and sound and light. We haven't even talked about how important sound is in the body. That's a whole other podcast. So incorporating sound into meditation is really important. And then also I'm a big fan of sort of active imagination. So I'd be sort of I like meditations where I can imagine something happening, like a particular color filling my body, and that color represents power. So then when I want to do a box jump, I can do it better. So even if it's, like you say, completely placebo and in my imagination, I still do the box jump better. But maybe there is some kind of other energy that I tapped into and filled myself and called it blue, and it was enabled me to jump better. So I think what surprised me most about it is that it works. About, it's like anything, being consistent and being clear with your manifestations and goals. And also when you manifest something, if it benefits lots of other people, it's much more likely to work. And I think Rabbi Lionel Blue used to like always saying prayers for other people work much better than prayers for yourself. um,
Mm.
and also, I'm a fan of things like measuring stuff. I'm using a CGM at the moment, a continuous glucose monitor. So I have found that particular meditations have made my blood sugar go down in a good way. I don't mean a crash. And I think a lot of people struggle nowadays with dysregulated blood sugar. So I always have different ways of measuring how did something work, because maybe might have been manifesting something for a long time and then I get it, so it worked. But then if I feel less stressed or my my heart rate and my blood sugar goes down, or I run some labs after being very consistent with some meditation and things improved. So I think another thing, what really surprised me, I knew this anyway, that what the mind believes can happen, the body will make happen. So a lot of it is how we can control biology with our minds. More than just sort of controlling heart rate and breathing, controlling other physiological processes. I had a friend called Simon. We're still friends now, called Simon Says, and he's a really amazing hypnotist. And he likes to do things like hypnosis for boob enhancement and hypnosis for gastric band hypnosis. So again, if the mind believes it, the body makes it happen. And I think that's really important for people who are unwell, that sometimes they keep looking in the biochemistry or the physical and they're not asking, am I doing this to myself using my mind?
Mm. I've long believed that as well, but maybe haven't had the intellectual confidence you have to really internalize that idea. Or I think I have. That your thoughts have consequences that affect your biology, right? And it's
Yeah, and
almost
also the thoughts can leave your mind. That's the whole point of Dan Winter and Rupert Sheldrake's messages, that consciousness isn't confined to skulls. It actually exists outside of the body, and it can travel faster than the speed of light. That sort of a quantum entanglement, and you can prove that scientifically. So just that alone, the idea that a thought is a thing, that I can influence something on the other side of the world with my mind. But also, you said that your intellectual capacity couldn't cope. I'd question that. I would say it's all about belief. That if you inject doubt into anything like a quantum field, if you don't 100% believe your own bullshit like I do, then it doesn't happen because you're holding back. And I think that's what holds people back from certain kinds of meditation or manifesting or ceremonies or whatever they want to call it. They feel stupid doing it even though nobody's watching, and they don't 100% believe. So it's one of these weird things that in order to make it work, you've got to 100% believe, but then you've got to actually see something happen in order to believe more. So sometimes the whole just pretending or fake it till you make it can work. And everything about meditation, even though our thoughts can leave our heads, if we're doing something, nobody's like knowing or watching really what we're doing. Even if it's a meditation that includes like hand movements or sounds, lots of times I'll see people sitting in a funny way and humming or saying something. So I kind of just leave them to it because they're getting some kind of massive joy out of whatever they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a lot of things in life. You got to go all in to unlock the benefits, and if you don't go all
Yes.
in, you don't get the upside.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And it's all does tie back to quantum biology, because everything in the body, if it's coherent, as in it's all non-chaotic, then all the little tiny important signals can get through, so we run efficiently. And it's the same if we want to translate it into, I'll call it metaphysics. I don't really like that word, but it's more the esotericism that you, again, if you inject doubt into your quantum field or your manifestation, you're creating chaos, because part of you saying, "Oh, I really want to have a giant YouTube channel," and then another part of you saying, "Oh, yeah, but I'm not good enough to do that." So you've injected doubt into your own manifestation. So it's now chaotic because it's not coherent. So it's a lot of this thing about as above and so below, and as within, so without. That it's like the same thing. And biology loves using the same recipes all over the place. Once it gets a good idea, it thinks, "Oh, I'll just use that physics here. I'll use it in the eye. I'll use it in the mitochondria." So a lot of things, it's all the same. Um, so the being coherent or non-chaotic on a biological level is also another way to say not having inflammation, because when we've got inflammation, it's just chaos in the body. And also stress, we could always call chaos as well. And we know inflammation and stress are very counterproductive for health and life. So yes.
it's amazing how you can tie everything together so coherently. It's really very, very refreshing. Um, your worldview, this lovely superpower you have, right? Where did it come from? And specifically, I guess what I'm getting at is what books have shaped your worldview the most?
Oh, I don't know. I've read that many. It's really hard to explain because I suppose I've studied Kabbalah. So if anybody's listening, I would recommend studying mysticism. And it doesn't matter. I've also studied Christian mysticism, like Meister Eckhart. A lot of people like him. And then Sufism, I know a little bit about. And then Hindu mysticism and shamanism. And I liked Kabbalah the most, but then I've got the rest of my life to carry on. And then a lot of the times I see deep rivers of truth in amongst the mystical traditions, but also there's lots of really valuable information in texts like the Quran and the Bible and codes and things like that. But also with books, there's just so many that over the time I'm trying to think of the Force v Power book. That's
Mm.
good. Um,
David Hawkins.
yes. Hmm.
It's often a hard one if you've read so many because it's not one,
Yeah.
it's the combination of them.
Yes, it is. It's like, but also I think there's massive value because I really like listening to fantasy, and it doesn't matter if it's C.S. Lewis or uh, H.G. Wells or modern lit RPGs. There's something, whenever I listen to those, I always think, or read them, even Harry Potter, I just think, how the hell did somebody think all of that up? It's just genius. So, and it's definitely some kind of divine inspiration. for these books, and I think hidden within these books, because it's literature, is some kind of subconscious message. Like, I really liked the stories by, he's called the Baal Shem Tov. He's the founder of Hasidic Judaism, and he used to teach Kabbalah through stories. And Kabbalah is not just for Jewish people; it's for everybody. And I think the power of conveying information through a story, and your unconscious mind has to then, because we don't really think in words, we kind of think in metaphors and pictures. So I think there's huge value in listening to a story or reading it, because you've got to imagine it yourself. I mean, I'm not against sort of movies and things like Avatar or whatever are fantastic, but I think not letting your brain always be entertained. And if you listen to stories, especially where you've got to try hard to imagine stuff because it's so bonkers, that's why I like the fantasy and the sci-fi so much, because it's like, how the hell did somebody think this up? And now I've got to picture it in my mind. And I think the better we are at visualizing, it doesn't matter whether it's fairies or dragons or spells or aliens. If we want to achieve a goal, we have to see ourselves kicking that football in the World Cup through in a goal, or we've got to see ourselves having whatever that amount of money we want, or see ourselves having that family and that house that we really want. So the ability to be able to create movies in your head, I think, is really important. And then in terms of trying to understand biochemistry, I really like pictures and movies. But then what I do is I do have an advantage because I did do a science degree. So I've seen pictures of these things. So when I'm listening to, say, a difficult podcast by someone like Jack Kruse or Stephanie Seneff or Gerald Pollack, I can close my eyes and listen in the dark. So they're talking about whatever it is, and then I'm playing a movie of the methylation or the structured water or the mitochondria, and then it makes it much easier for me to make slides or draw a picture to teach somebody else. So I can play a movie in my head and then watch it and then try and explain the movie to people, because I think being able to explain things to people is very important, but also they want to know, well, how do I do it as well? And I think where we're going with this, because I know the secret curved ball you're throwing at me at the end, that the kind of point of this podcast is about, your mind is much more than you think it is. And I think watching too much amazing CGI generated movies could impact our own ability to make mind movies. And then people that listen to podcasts while they're hoovering or walking the dog and chatting to a friend, I don't think you're giving it your full focus. Because that's the other thing. Focused human attention is also electrically centripetal. So it does tie back into all of these coherent waves. And I think people really struggle focusing these days. So that's sort of one tip that I would give people if with an audio book or a written book, even if you read the words, you still have to imagine the pictures. And if you listen, I prefer audio to words, but other people might like words versus audio, but always do your best to imagine the thing. And it doesn't have to be anything to do with science. It can be we all have goals and things we want to achieve, and a lot of people just don't try because they think they can't, or they really want something, they just don't know how to tell their subconscious or their consciousness or the universe they want it.
Sarah, honestly, I think you are absolutely brilliant. You're so wonderfully broad, and you've got a very electric mind. It's super cool and very inspiring.
Yeah.
Last question from me, which, I mean, you've sort of covered. We've probably covered about 9 different things, which would be a suitable answer for this. But I will ask, what important truth do you believe that very few people agree with you on?
Humans are telepathic.
Right. Tell us more.
I thought we've got the ability to communicate with our minds, and it's not necessarily just amongst humans. We can do it with animals and plants, and then I'm pretty sure. We're not going to even go here about other entities. The only way we have ability to communicate with those is through our minds, and then we can do it through our minds with each other. So that's what I think. And because the question is, what do I believe that other people disagree with me a lot with? But then on the other hand, some people like disagree with me in the beginning, and then they go away and think about it, and then think, oh yeah, actually, the phone rang earlier and I knew straight away it was my boss, and stuff like that. So that's I don't that's what I because the thing is, on the if you announce that, if I was on the train and I stood up at the front of the train going from Leeds to London and announced that, I don't know what the rest of the carriage would say, but I think it's classed as, what do I believe that other people disagree with me with, and I would say that.
Well, I think everyone can relate in their own way. I mean, everyone's had that spooky feeling where their phone hasn't started to ring yet, and yet they're like, "Oh, okay, no call's coming in," and it starts to ring. And then it reminds me of my favorite line ever. Um, on the everyone else, what do you believe that everyone else doesn't quite believe? Right? It's but you're smart and I'm right, so you'll agree with me eventually, which I love. Uh, but Sarah, this has been amazing. Thank you so much
So
for coming on.
just in terms of being fair, what do you believe to be true that other people disagree with you with? Because has anybody ever said right back at you with your own question?
Do you know what? They actually haven't, and
Oh yes, I'm the first to
it,
do it.
you're
Yeah.
the first to do it. That's a curveball.
Yes.
I've got a few. Firstly, I appreciate you throwing that back at me. I think I don't think you would find this very contrarian, I guess, but I think most diseases are metabolic in nature. Um,
Mhm.
and I think the more conversations I have, the more I'm convinced of that. I think the world is way more plastic than people think. Um, and I think that the unlock is to overcome loss aversion. And I think when you can overcome loss aversion, which I think a lot of what you were speaking about today is very related to that, the world expands infinitely. But it's just overcoming that loss aversion piece. So I think if I was to stand up on a train between Leeds and London and say a few of those things, I don't think many people would agree with me.
That just reminded me, because you were saying about books to read. There's a book called Reality is Plastic by Anthony Jacquin that's a really good book about hypnosis. This is the problem with books. I've read that many and I know of that many. I need some kind of trigger. And then straight away when you said reality is plastic, if somebody's interested in hypnosis, and I would Anthony Jacquin. I discovered him because ages ago he did this YouTube series where he just said all he's going to do is live, and all he's got is hypnosis. So he ended up hypnotizing these people to get food and a room in a hotel. And he's a really nice man as well. And then his book Reality's Plastics, really interesting because he goes against the general narrative of just boring old hypnotherapy and relaxotherapy. He talks about something called automatic imagination, and it's very applicable and readable to a lay person, and he is still alive. He's not that old. His dad's called Freddie Jacquin, and he's an expert at group giving up smoking and things. And the Jacquins, I would definitely say, are a really good way into hypnosis because they're really nice men. And he has a book. You can find Anthony Jacquin on YouTube, so he's definitely real. And he has a really interesting and broad view of reality as plastic. And I think it's really sums up what you said about I just say the world that we live in is not what we think it is. And I don't even know what that is now, but I think we'll just leave it there, that the reality is plastic.
What a great note to end on. Dr.
Yes.
Sarah Pugh, you're a legend. Where can we keep up with you, and where can we find your work and follow along? I know you've got a great
Um,
YouTube channel called Busy Superhuman.
yes, I've got a YouTube channel, and I've got the quantum based podcast, which is it's like interviews and things, the same as the YouTube channel, but for listening. Then I go by Busy Superhuman on Instagram, so that's got carousels and pictures and some reels. I've got TikTok for sort of short form content, and then I've got Substack, which is sort of like for people that like longer form written information. So I've pretty much got everything. And I've also got like free lead magnets and things that, like Introduction to Quantum Biology, or Introduction to Leptin, or Introduction to Quantum sort of Clear Out, and then some small courses. And I'm just about to launch a practitioner course. And then I help my friend Kira Lee in Australia. We have a quantum health academy. So we've kind of got everything, like free stuff, very small courses, practitioner courses, and then big courses. So there's something for everybody. And I always say to people, just go into my free stuff first, because there's like lots of really useful things on Instagram and free lead magnets. Obviously, the YouTube, it's free to watch, and we've had some of the same guests, and there's some really intelligent people out there that blow our minds.
Absolutely, and you're one of them. Thanks so much for coming on. That's super fun. Thanks for everyone to making it this far, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Oh yeah, thank you very much, Ben. It's been great. Well.